So if the mic quality is kind of awful this time around, it's because my mic is kind of busted, so I'm just sort of relying on the camera mic right now, so if it's slightly worse than before, it's probably because of that. But this is the Vernon Strip Out Edition, and honestly, seeing the state of this move on the internet has kind of given me a sort of headache, because it's not only on YouTube where this sort of misnomer of this move and sort of miscrediting of this move has sort of taken over. It's kind of a bit here and there everywhere in the community. So there's a lot to unpack from this move, and let's just jump right into it. So just from the move itself, or the name itself rather, you'd assume that this move actually belongs to the one and only Vernon. And just looking at the publication dates and history and everything like that, you'd be right, because an early version of this move was actually found in the Vernon card problem, which is in effect published in 10 card problems back in 1932 by Vernon. This effect was then published in two separate places, that is the Phoenix number 248 back in 1952, and then that would be the Best in Magic back in 1956 by Bruce Elliott. So in those two publications, this move was actually used in two different effects. That would be BDV, Bruce and Vernon, and the second effect is the Circle or Pass the Cards. And this entire publication history and all that stuff was actually discussed and pretty much proven in the Vernon Chronicles Volume 1 back in 1987 by Vernon, written by Stephen Minch. So basically, yeah, we pretty much have an entire sort of history already mapped out for us. And it's actually in the Vernon Chronicles Volume 1 that there's actually two handlings of the Vernon Strip Out Edition that are discussed. And we're basically going to be talking about both sort of handlings in this video. The second handling is actually a bit more uncommon. It's actually the handling that I personally prefer, but not a lot of people actually know about it because most people just know the first handling. But where there's actually a potential point of contention for the history actually comes in the form of a guy named Audley Walsh. But Audley Walsh actually published an effect back in 1936 in the Jinx issue 21 called the Audley Walsh Coincidence. So in that effect, there's actually a move that looks suspiciously like the Vernon Strip Out Edition. It's a 4-year difference, 1932 and 1936, but again, that's only in terms of publication history. It doesn't really prove too much because obviously people can come out with things independently and then publish them like years later, right? Publication dates are usually just a point of reference. They don't usually determine basically everything. And usually, as we've seen from Marlowe and a lot of his moves, usually it's usually like the more popular name that takes over sort of the naming of a particular move and all that stuff. But anyways, that move, the move that looks like the Vernon Strip Out Edition by Audley Walsh, that move was actually republished in a different effect in Card Manipulation Series number 5 back in 1936 by G. Newgard. That was published in a sort of effect called Novel Beginning for a 4-Ace Trick by Audley Walsh. And so I'll just read you a brief sort of description of the move by Audley Walsh, and you'll see how actually similar it is to the Vernon Strip Out Edition. Quote, "Spread the deck and invite a spectator to touch any 4 cards at different points, and to draw each card halfway out without looking at the faces. Close the fan, leaving the 4 cards protruding, and secretly riffle off the 4 aces at the bottom with the right thumb, holding the break with the left little fingertip. Take the inner end of the pack, above the break, with the right thumb and the middle finger, and strip out the 4 protruding cards together with the 4 aces below." Unquote. So very clearly, some form of the Vernon Strip Out Edition, if you're already familiar with the handling. It's basically sort of the exact same move with a few minor differences here and there, but the same core sort of idea of just stripping out a card, 4 cards, and then adding cards onto that packet, right? But even then, again, there's a 4-year gap, right? Vernon's earliest publication of the Vernon Strip Out Edition was back in 1932, and Audley Walsh's was back in 1936. But again, that's only publication dates. We don't actually know when these moves are actually conceptualized and all of that stuff. But of course, publication dates sort of dictate that Vernon created the move first. But there's also another thing that I want to point out. It's that on library.com, where they usually have trustworthy research and credentials, but again, I couldn't really find any more reference to this. So again, it's only from library.com, so it's whether or not it's actually reliable information is up for debate. But they actually say that Audley Walsh started Magic in 1932. Now again, it's a pretty vague sort of statement. I can't really find any sources for that elsewhere. But Vernon published this move back in 1932, which means that if Audley Walsh actually started Magic back in 1932, it would be impossible for Audley Walsh to have created this move before Vernon, right? Because if Vernon published this move in the same year that he started Magic, then that would mean that Vernon actually holds the sort of credentials to this move. But again, we don't know if that's actually true. I'm not exactly sure if this sort of claim is necessarily true, but regardless, Vernon published this move before Audley Walsh. That remains undebatable, and so Vernon technically has the claim to this move. Now, what happened to the move in modern times? Well, basically the move in modern times has been subject to a classic case of whoops, wrong name, and now the wrong name has stuck around. If you've seen this move actually sort of floating online, you might have seen this move actually under the name of the Vernon Transfer, which is actually a wrong name. It's a misnomer because the Vernon Transfer, or the Transfer move, sorry, which is also a move published in Vernon Chronicles Volume 1, that move is a completely different move with no relationship to the Vernon Strip Out edition. It's not even like, I don't even know why people call this move the Vernon Transfer. It's not even a transfer, it's an addition, right? You're adding cards onto a 4-card packet. It doesn't make sense that's called the Vernon Transfer. But this name kind of stuck around, and then this move is now called the Vernon Transfer for whatever reason. So why did it actually get this name? Well, that's because of a move named the Vernon Substitute Transfer, which is actually not an actual move, by the way. The Vernon Substitute Transfer does not actually exist. So I did some digging, and apparently the Vernon Substitute Transfer actually came from Jay Sankey, right? So Jay Sankey basically used the Vernon Strip Out edition in conjunction with Derek Dingle's No Lap Switch, and then he essentially just called it the Vernon Substitute Transfer, which then sort of became shortened as the Vernon Transfer over time. And that's pretty much it. That's pretty much why this move is called the Vernon Transfer nowadays, even though it's actually should be called the Vernon Strip Out edition. Now, this actually isn't the first time that Jay Sankey has miscredited or misnamed a move. It has actually happened a couple of times, because I actually have a distinct memory of Jay Sankey teaching the Future Reverse, and he actually calls the move the Future Reverse by Paul LaPaul, which we've already discussed this is not right, because the Future Reverse is most commonly associated with Ed Marlowe. So yeah, it's not necessarily uncommon for Jay Sankey to miscredit moves. So if you ever see this move sort of being done online and sort of with the wrong name, then you'll know that it's actually called the Vernon Strip Out edition and not the Vernon Transfer. And that's pretty much the history behind this move. It's a lot longer than I thought it would be, but I'd rather have people calling this move by its actual name than by people calling it the wrong name. Yeah, so yeah, here's good crediting, hopefully. But again, I'm only human, I can make mistakes, but hopefully that sorted out a bit of the misnaming and all of that stuff. So, as mentioned previously, there are two ways to do the Vernon Strip Out edition. So let's discuss the first version as described in the Vernon Chronicles Volume 1. This is the move without any sort of additional changes on my part. And this will be the one that most people will be familiar with. It's the one that most people will call the Vernon transfer. But again, it's not known as the Vernon transfer. That is a completely different move. So the only setup that you really need is that you want the 4 aces or whichever 4 of a kind on the bottom of the deck. Just for explanation purposes, I'll be using a 4 of a kind from a different deck. To be honest, it doesn't even need to be for a 4 of a kind or even 4 cards. It can be less than 4 cards because again, this is an addition. You're adding cards onto the cards that you're taking out of the deck. So it really doesn't have to be the same amount of cards. It's not necessarily a switch. You can use it for a switch, but generally it is an addition. It's an add-on, right? But since 4 is the default, we're going to be using 4 cards. So again, the 4 aces, all right? So these 4 aces will be on the bottom of the deck, and of course they're going to be face down. So again, they're only different because of explanation purposes. So to start off, we're going to be doing a relatively tight spread. So what I mean by that is that when you're actually spreading through the deck, notice that there are certain spreads where you can just spread the entire deck out like so. And then there's certain spreads where you spread in clumps. You do this, you push out, you close, you push out, you close, you push out, and you close. This is the sort of spread that you want, right? You want to sort of spread in clumps, close, spread in clumps, close, right? And this will be important for the main mechanics of the move. So what you want, again, is as you spread through the deck, you spread one clump, close, spread one clump, and you're going to up jog one card, right? Your spectator is going to point to one card and you're going to up jog it. So you're going to up jog it by about halfway through. But what you actually want is that you're actually going to want to up jog the card, but actually slightly to the left. So then the lower left corner is actually sticking out slightly. And this is going to be important for 2 reasons. This is so then the spectator can see the entire left long edge of the card that they selected. So then now it actually sticks out a lot more, right? Because if it's just blended in like so, it can be confusing, right? Especially if you're using like a boardless deck or whatever. So this additional corner sticking out is basically going to be important for the sake of distinction. The second reason why is that it's actually going to provide cover for the move. Having this sort of left long edge is actually going to help hide the cards that you're going to be adding on, which is why that you want these this left long edge over here sticking out. Okay, so you're just going to go through the deck, up jog one card as the spectator gestures to one, continue pushing, and you're basically just going to redo this, right? You're going to redo this until you have 4 cards up jogged. All right, up jog the second card, up jog the third. And then it's during the 4th card that's actually going to be slightly different, because the 4th card, there's actually a very, very specific range of cards that you want this 4th card to be selected from. So you want the card to actually be selected close to the bottom of the deck, but you also don't want it to be like 5 cards down. So you want it to be close to basically essentially maybe like 10, 15 cards off the bottom, right? So essentially you're going to spread and then you're going to say, okay, let's say you're going to up jog this card over here, all right? And the reason why you want this card at this exact range is that you're actually going to basically spread through the rest of the deck, right? And I'm going to say something along the lines of, okay, so you could have selected any of these cards, but during this moment, you're actually going to spread to the bottom of the deck, and I'm going to spot your 4 cards. So visually, again, you can see that there are your 4 aces over here, and that's going to be very important because by spotting these 4 cards, you can easily get a break above these 4 cards. So now, once that you spread these 4 cards, your left thumb is actually just going to go on top and apply just a bit of pressure, and then you're basically just going to clamp down on it. So now you have this. Essentially, your left hand is basically just going to be clipping these 4 cards independently from the rest of the deck. Meaning that when you actually want to sort of close the spread, what can happen is that you can actually just tilt your left hand down slightly, right? And this actually opens up a gap, like so. So when you actually just close the spread, because these 4 cards are distinct, and then they're sort of angled like so, when you actually close the deck, you can stick your pinky into this gap, and then when you close the spread, your pinky can then grab a pinky break, just like so, all right? And this pinky break is gonna be held above these 4 cards. So again, you're clipping these 4 cards, you're angling them, and then when you close the spread, you can stick your pinky over there, and there you have a pinky break above of the 4 cards. So now these 4 cards are essentially sort of independent from the rest of the deck, just like so, okay? And again, you sort of want to maintain this left long edge sort of sticking out over here, because again, it helps with the the cover of the move, all right? So once the deck is essentially square, your left pinky is going to pull down on these 4 cards, and it's going to widen up the break, right? So obviously we have our standard pinky break, but you're just going to pull this 4 card packet down and open up the break. Your right index and middle finger instantly go into this break, and you're basically just going to clamp down on the entire deck with these 2 fingers and your right thumb to basically anchor down the entire deck. So now you have 2 distinct packets. If I remove my right hand, of course my left hand is holding this 4 card packet, the 4 aces, and I would have this deck over here held by my right hand and clipped by my middle index and thumb, like so, okay? So now that you're in this position, your pinky, your left pinky, is essentially going to shift down to the bottom short edge of this packet, all right? It's gonna shift down, and you don't have to worry about losing this break at this point, because if you let go, your right hand fingers are going to block this packet. So even if you let go with your pinky, you will still have this break, okay? So once you have this, your pinky is going to move to the back short edge of this packet, and then it can just pull down on it. And what this does is that actually buckles this packet. So now it's basically in a sort of awkward upside down U shape. But this actually, you're basically straddling this 4 card packet, right? You're basically straddling this 4 card packet and you're bending it. And this actually gives you sort of a distinct advantage. It's very uncomfortable, but this actually allows you to shorten the length of these 4 cards. What I mean by this is that if you actually have like a packet of cards, for example, right? If you have a packet of cards, you have hidden underneath on our card, right? If we take a look at this, right? Just for reference sake, if you take a look at this, they are the same length, right? That's playing cards. Playing cards are 88.9 millimeters by 63.5 millimeters, right? They are always going to be the same length if they're poker size. But if I just straddle this packet and bend it, look at what happens. Now the visible length of this playing card is now shortened by at least half, because now if you actually take a look at it, they're not going to be the same length, right? I can tilt this packet back so much more because these are not going to be the same length. Whereas if I let go of this packet, you're going to be able to see them, right? You're going to be able to see the thickness. So just having this packet sort of straddled and buckled and bent means that now there's less of a risk of exposing this packet because it's shortened and hidden underneath of the deck. So that's the main reason why you want this packet sort of buckled like so, okay? It's to mainly just shorten the amount that they see, essentially, right? Once you have this position, now that your right hand is essentially clamping down on this entire packet, what you can do is that you're actually just going to start moving your left hand forward along with this packet over here. It's just going to start moving forward and forward until and you're going to start moving your right hand backwards as well. So basically it's a dual motion. Your right hand moves backwards and your left hand moves forward. And it's going to start moving, and then here's where it gets a bit sketchy. Again, you only have the upjog cards to sort of hide everything, but because they're sort of fanned out, again, that acts as cover for this 4-card packet over here, right? You're gonna start, you're going to advance your left hand, and once your index finger sort of peeks over the front short edge of these upjaw cards, that's when you're going to stop moving forward, because my index finger is essentially going to act as a gauge, right? It's going to act as a gauge because the moment that my index finger sort of peeks over, that's when I know that if I advance any more, this packet is going to flash, even if it's sort of buckled, right? So the moment I see my index finger sort of peek over the edge, that's when my left thumb just clamps down on this 4-card packet and just pulls them out like so, okay? So now what we have is our 4-card packet, and it's just going to be sort of separated by this buckle over here. And of course we have our other 4 cards over here. Those are the cards that we are adding on, right? So that is our addition. We have our 4 cards, our 4 indifferent cards, and we have the cards that we wanted added onto the bottom of the deck over here. All right. And at this point, Vernon would just sort of relax. He would relax and let go of this packet, square everything up. And what he would do is that he would just take this, and what Vernon would do is that he would just take the deck, turn it face up, and then take this entire 8-card packet, flip it on top of the face up deck, and then just reveal that they extracted the 4 aces, right? And it's not the cleanest sort of handling, but it is what Vernon did. And if it worked for Vernon, then it can work for other people. But that is how he actually handled the move in the Vernon Chronicles, all right? As described, that's the cleanup for the move, all right? So that is the Vernon sort of strip out edition. But of course, there's nothing that says that you have to use 4 cards, or 4 selections rather. Of course, you can have 2 cards selected and then add on these 4 cards, right? There's nothing that says that you can't do that. You can also use, of course, 3 cards and then add 4 cards, or 3 cards. It doesn't really matter. Again, it's an addition, right? There's no set routine. There's no set anything for this. Honestly, you could have 4 cards upjogged and then add an additional card for maybe a Twisting the Aces routine, right? Again, it really depends on the sort of routine that you really want for this move. Again, I think a lot of people have this preconception of this move being sort of a switch, but really it's an addition. You add cards onto an indifferent amount of cards. Again, you can of course do it face up as well. So if I want to add like the 4 aces and just 1 additional card, that's possible as well, right? So again, it really depends on what you want. So that is the Vernon strip out edition. I wouldn't recommend, however, using just 1 card and then adding on like 4 cards, because you just don't have enough cover with 1 card. If you're ballsy enough, sure, but generally I wouldn't recommend it. So yeah, that is the Vernon strip out edition. That's like the 3rd time I say that. So
let's go over the move again, but now that you know the mechanics, we can sort of talk about the angles and the pacing of this move. So up until the widening of the break, so up until you do this essentially, up until there, everything can be done at your own rhythm. You can spread through the deck at your own rhythm, you can upjog cards at your own rhythm, you can close the spread at your own rhythm, and then you could get the break when you want, right? That's all at your own pace. And that's also when the move has the most amount of the best angles, because you pretty much haven't really done the move yet, right? The only sort of angle that you have to consider is that you shouldn't flash these cards, right? You shouldn't flash the face of these indifferent cards, because you're going to be adding on an extra card to it, you're going to maybe switch them out, so you really don't want to flash these sort of upjog cards. It would be sort of risky, right? So that's pretty much the only thing that you need to take into consideration when you're doing the selection process. It's when you widen up the break that you pretty much need to sort of take into consideration of your angles and your pacing a lot more, right? Because when I start to widen up the break, look at what happens. Now I have a vulnerability on the right hand side. They can see this separation. Of course, there's a very easy fix where you just sort of just relax your hand, tilt it downwards at a 45-degree angle, so then they only see the backs, and then they can't really see it from the left hand side because you're just tilting it like so. So really just relaxing your wrist and just letting the deck be at a 45-degree angle to the ground will work as well, but generally you should still be sort of be conscious of this. But once you widen up the break, you sort of don't want to be stuck in this position because it might warp the cards and whatnot. So at this point, the rest of the move has to be pretty much be done in one motion. So the moment that you widen up the break, your right hand just clips everything there. You move your pinky to the bottom short edge, you buckle this packet, and then you move forward, right? What Vernon actually suggests is that you can also angle the backs of the cards towards the audience. So what this means is that you actually just tilt this packet downwards like so. So then they actually see more of the backs, right? If I have the spectator at this angle over here and they're looking down, you can actually just angle the deck slightly towards them, right? So then they get more of the backs of the cards. So that's what Vernon suggests as you start to buckle this packet and when you start to execute the add-on like so, right? So at that point, pretty much everything has to be done in one smooth motion, and that's how you cover the angle from the front essentially. But of course, like I said, now there's a vulnerability at the right hand side. So once that happens, you know, just relax this packet. Just relax this packet and add it onto this packet. So then you have one singular thickness of cards over here. All right. And honestly, as far as the angles kind of go for this move, I would say the angles are sort of similar to a bottom palm, if that makes sense. Whereas if a bottom palm, right, it seems kind of obvious, right, from the right hand side and all that stuff. But really, if you have a shortened sort of length of card underneath it, it's really quite similar to a bottom palm, because up to a certain point, if I have this, up to a certain point, you can actually just get away with showing your knuckles and sort of the underneath of the card, right? You can sort of get away with it. Sort of like a bottom palm, right? It's very similar to a bottom palm in terms of angles, I would say, once you have this, right? But again, if you don't want these angles, just release the pressure with your pinky, add it onto the bottom of this packet, and then you're done, right? So that's generally the angles and the pacing. Really, the only weakness is sort of from the right-hand side, but again, you can easily mitigate that. And of course, for the front, just tilt the packet downwards slightly, so then you can see the packets more, so then you can see the backs more, sorry. And then pacing, again, everything can be sort of be done at your own rhythm up until you grab the packet and then strip them out. That has to be done in one sort of singular motion. So that's the angle and the pacing. So that was how Vernon approached the move, but here's just a few personal touches Again, this isn't to say that Vernon's method for this move is bad. It's just how I would handle the move slightly differently because of my hands, of my thought processes. Again, it's not necessarily to say that his moves were bad or anything like that. It's just personal preferences, which I think, you know, every magician should be more comfortable with having for certain moves, because again, all our hands are different. We're gonna have different sort of hand sizes, different sort of climates that we're performing in, things that make, you know, different handlings of different moves. So generally, I don't think it's too much of a problem to have different handlings, but yeah. So this first touch is something that I've seen Dennis Kim do, and that is, rather than spreading to the bottom of the deck during the selection process to get the break, so in the original method, like I said, they would upjog the 4 cards, right? And then have the bottom card be selected from a very specific range, and then spread to the bottom 4 cards and say, oh, you can select any of these 4 cards, and that way they can visually spot the four cards. That's not necessarily the most optimized like handling to get 4 cards, right? Because of course you have to look down at the deck, which some people might not like. So yeah, this is a visual confirmation of 4 cards. And there's a rather easy way to actually mitigate this. So of course you have your 4 cards. So rather than just spreading to the bottom, counting the 4 cards, what you're going to do is that you're actually going to in-jog the 4th card. So what you can do is that you're actually just going to do a pinky pull down, which I already did a video of. You're going to get a pinky pull down. You're going to stick your pinky deep into this break until the pad of your pinky can wrap around and contact the back of this 4th card, of this 4th ace, right? So it's going to wrap around like so. And what it's going to do is that your pinky is actually just going to pull backwards. It's going to pull backwards, and it's actually just going to get an in-jog on this card over here, okay? So it's just going to go directly backwards, like so, okay? Only on the 4th card. So then you're just going to do this, and now we have an in-jog. If you can't get this in-jog easily because of certain weather conditions, of certain sort of specifications for your hands, what you can do is that you can actually start with the 4 aces on top of the deck, and what you just need to do is that you can just do an in-jog shuffle. So what you can do is shuffle 1, 2, 3, and then on the 4th ace, you just pull it backwards into an in-jog. Have your pinky contact the face of this fourth card to sort of anchor it down, and then you just overhand shuffle the rest of the deck on top normally. And because your pinky is contacting the face of this card, it anchors it down, so you can square up the rest of the deck and still maintain that in-jog. So that's just a quick explanation of the in-jog shuffle, but here you use it for a setup for this move, okay? So either way, you just get an in-jog on the 4th ace over here, right? So now that you have this, essentially, you can just do the move as per normal. You can just do the move as per normal as long as you don't flash this in-jog. So now the angles sort of change a bit from this point on, right? You have to essentially tilt the deck slightly upwards to hide this in-jog. So if you can see it normally, so this is generally the good angle for an in-jog, but if you're really scared of the spectators seeing the in-jog, you can tilt it slightly upwards like so, and that hides the in-jog, right? Not really too big of an issue, because when you actually start spreading through the deck, it's messy, it hides the in-jog a lot better, so generally I shouldn't be too afraid of the angles for an in-jog. So the in-jog essentially acts as a bookmark. I know where my 4th ace is going to be at all times, even without getting a break. So now that I have this, I just start spreading through the deck. One card, 2 cards, 3 cards, and then the 4th card. So remember, I had to have the 4th card selected from the bottom of the deck, but also not the 5th card. But because I have my 4th card over here, my in-jog over here, that means I can have my 4th card selected from anywhere. The main reason why you had to have the fourth card selected near the bottom was so then you could spread to the bottom, count 4 cards, and then get a break from there. But because my in-jog already bookmarked where I need to sort of get a break from, I really don't need to visually spot the four cards. I can have the 4th card upjogged from anywhere. It really doesn't matter. So that's an advantage of having the in-jog over here, right? So once I have my 4 cards sort of selected, I can close the deck and I will still have my in-jog over here. So that could delay getting the break. So if I have anyone looking from the right hand side, they just see a messy deck, but I know for a fact my in-jog is still there. So I know my in-jog will forever be protected. I know where my 4th card is, and whenever I'm ready to do the move, that's when I actually turn this in-jog into a break, okay? But what's really interesting about this in-jog is that this allows me to skip a step. Because remember, I had to get a break, widen up the break, stick my hands in there, and then move my pinky to the back short edge and then pull this break down, right, to buckle the deck. Here, we can actually sort of skip a step because of the in-jog. My left pinky, can move to the back short edge and just pull directly down on this in-jog, and this automatically gets me my buckle. Right? It gets me my break and my buckle at once, which means the moment I stick my right hand in there, it's already in the buckle. Right? I don't have to widen up the break, stick my right hand in there, move my pinky. My pinky can just move to the back, widen up the break, and it's already in a buckle position, which means I can just get into the move a lot faster. Right? So that is just an additional sort of advantage of using the in-jog, right? Now, here's where there's another sort of change in handling for me personally. So remember when I said the angle of this move sort of resembles the bottom palm? I'm basically doing that to some degree, all right? So when my hand sort of slides forward to clamp down on my 4 cards, I really don't wait for my index to reach the front short edge. I find that for me personally, there might be some risk of this top left corner sort of flashing, and I don't really want that. So what I do is that I just sort of treat it like a bottom palm, right? I have my index sort of just laying there. So then the moment that my thumb reaches about like halfway through, I can just pull this packet outwards. And it really doesn't matter because again, my pinky is buckling this packet, which means that I'm shortening the length of this packet over here. So I really don't have to worry too much about just having like this packet sort of flash, right? It's already hidden. So I really don't need to have perfect alignment with my index. I can just sort of have it just laying off to the front like so, right? So it doesn't really matter all too much. And then from here, it's essentially the same sort of angles as the bottom palm, right? It's the same exact angles as the bottom palm. I don't really need to use my index finger as a guide, right? At this point, right? It's the same angles as a bottom palm. So again, like there's a certain point at which I can tilt this hand, and then as long as I don't go past my middle knuckle over here, I know my angles are going to be good, right? Like I know that they're going to be covered because again, I'm treating this the same as a bottom palm. My angles are going to be fine even if I have massive windows, right? So for example, again, I have a bottom palm, so I can tilt my hand up until this point, but really I have massive windows over here, right? So don't be afraid of the angles of this move. They're actually pretty good, right? You don't really have to be too afraid of this move. And if you want to square up everything, just do this, right? Just relax and just square up everything in one solid packet. And that's it. So those are all of my personal touches for the move. Again, it's just how I would approach the move. Your hands and style are yours, and other changes will be up to you. But this is just how I've sort of modified it for my own sort of liking and usages. So this is the method of the Vernon Strip Out edition that most of you will not know. It's actually my preferred handling, but most people don't actually know of it. So you're actually going to start off pretty much exactly the same way as you did the original Vernon Strip Out edition. So essentially you have your 4 aces at the bottom of the deck, and you're going to spread through the deck. So you're going to jog 1 card, 2 cards, 3 cards, and then you're going to upjog your 4th card. And of course, you're going to spread through the rest of the deck and say, okay, so you could have selected any of these 4 cards. Any of these cards. Sorry, not these 4 cards. But you could have selected any of these cards. And then you're going to visually spot your 4 cards just the same as the first method. Your left thumb's going to clamp down on them. So now you have your own separate packet. And then you're basically just going to, again, like the first method, you're going to angle this packet downwards, slightly downwards, so this creates this gap as your right hand holds the rest of the deck, right? So it just opens up like so, and that's pretty much it. It's when you actually close the spread that this move actually starts to act differently. Because when you actually start to close the spread, your right pinky is actually going to stick itself into this gap, right? So again, it widened up, and now you're basically just going to stick your pinky into it. This packet will slide underneath of your middle and ring finger, but your pinky will be inside and on top of these 4 cards, right? So it goes like this, right? So the ending position should be something that's very odd and might be uncomfortable and looks like this, right? So here you have your index, middle, and ring finger applying a bit of pressure upwards onto these 4 cards as your pinky sort of acts as a barrier between these 4 cards and the rest of the deck. But that is actually what we call a wedge break. It's actually one of my favorite breaks to use, and it's honestly very, very versatile. Most people are kind of afraid of using it, but this is essentially the final position that you are going to end up in. Again, index, middle, and ring finger are going to be clamping down on the entire deck and the 4 card packet from underneath. Your pinky is going to be inserted into the back of the deck, in between of the rest of the deck and the 4 card packet. And your thumb is just on top, applying a bit of pressure. And all of this happens as you feed this deck into your right hand, like so. So from this point on, you're basically just going to mirror the first method. So essentially, once you have this, your middle and index finger from your left hand are just going to slip underneath of your wedge break, like so, or in between the wedge break, sorry. Your left thumb is just going to clamp down on the bottom left corner, like so. And now essentially you have your deck anchored. And the 4 card packet is going to act independently in your right hand. So from here, you can then move this wedge break and the 4 packets sort of forward, like so. Again, much like the original method, alright? So it can just move forward like so. So it's just going to start moving forward, and your left hand is just going to start moving back. And much like before, the moment that your index finger sort of peeks over the front short edge, your right thumb is just going to clamp down on this sort of 4 indifferent cards, and they're just going to pluck them out like so, okay? From here, what Vernon would actually do was that he would actually just reposition the deck and just regrip it in a left-hand dealer's grip. He would then remove the right pinky, so then these 4 cards would then go flush on the bottom of these 4 indifferent cards. And now he has pretty much an 8 card packet over here. He would then take this packet and then flip it face up on top of this deck. So then he could then just push off 1 ace, 2 ace, and then 3 aces, and then he will leave this 4th ace on top, where it would hide the rest of the 4 cards, of the 4 indifferent cards. So then you're basically left with sort of a display of 4 aces. And that's what Vernon would do for this sort of handling of the Vernon Strip Out edition. Again, it's not necessarily the best handling for maybe cleaning up an add-on, because it's just straight up displaying sort of the 4 aces, whereas with an add-on you would sort of make use of the cards maybe a bit later on, but this works as well. So here we have our 4 aces, and that's how you would do the Vernon Stripper edition, the second method. So for angles and pacing, I think a lot of people will be put off with the wedge break, but really isn't as scary as people think, right? You have cards on top of the deck covering the wedge break, right? Even if I didn't have any cards upjogged, let's take a look at the wedge break from just normal, right? You have this. This is what a wedge break looks like without any cards covering from the top, right? And look at the angles. I can tilt the deck and you still wouldn't see it, right? Anything that has the backs of the deck facing the line of sight, you don't really have to worry about the angles. Where you have to worry is essentially the left-hand side this time. But again, you can do the exact same thing as you did for the first method, where you just sort of tilt the right hand downwards at a 45-degree angle like so, and then they will only see the backs, right? And then even from the right hand side, they'll see this. They'll see the back of your hand more than they'll see this, right? So really, you don't have to worry about the angles of a wedge break. They're very good. Like generally, again, you can just tilt the deck 45-degree angle, and pretty much your angles are going to be covered. Even from the front, look at the wedge break from the front. Because my ring finger, middle, and index are clamping down at the front, and it's only my pinky that's elevating this packet, the front will have no sort of indication that there's anything wrong with it. The angles of a wedge break are very, very good. And naturally, because my pinky is just sticking down like the back, this naturally buckles this packet, which again, as we've established, this shortens the length of the card, which means that they'll see less of it. So there's really nothing to really fear about the wedge break. It genuinely is like one of the best sort of angled moves and breaks that I use all the time, even if it's awkward, even if it looks uncomfortable. And pacing wise, it's pretty much really the same thing as the first method. Up until you stick your pinky in there, it's pretty much the same sort of pacing, right? You can have the cards selected at your own rhythm, you can spread the cards at your own rhythm, but once you have this wedge break sort of established, then you sort of just move forward, strip out these 2 cards, and there we go. And again, good angles. Good angles pretty much all around, right? Like, you really don't have to fear the wedge break. And of course, you can merge it with the in-jog. So if I have this card sort of in-jogged over here, all right, same thing, right? I can just do this, have my 4 cards up-jogged, and then I don't even need to count to the bottom few cards. I can actually just close the spread, my pinky contacts this in-jog card, presses down on it, and then slips under on top of it. It slips over it, and then I can just turn my in-jog into a wedge break in an instant as I close this spread. So again, it goes from a spread. My pinky contacts the in-jog, pushes down on it, and then slips underneath of it. And that's how you turn an in-jog into a pinky break. So again, just using an in-jog, you can just again, just optimize, I think, the handling of the move. But again, that's only for my particular sort of usages of this move.
So if you want to learn more about the Vernon Strip Out Edition, there's a couple of resources that you can look at. Of course, there's Vernon Chronicles Volume 1 by Vernon, written by Stephen Minch. There's the complete works of Derek Dingle by Derek Dingle, written by Richard Kaufman. So in there's the no lap switch, as we've discussed in the history section. And then there's Paper Engine by Aaron Fisher. Again, it's a very, very good book, even though it's like 20 years old now, probably closer to like 25, I want to say. I don't know, I'm kind of off with my dates these days. But there's also Mr. Jennings Takes It Easy by Larry Jennings, written by Richard Kaufman. Again, in that book, it sort of describes the two different handlings of the Vernon Strip Out Edition, but with some effects and all of that stuff by Larry Jennings. So those are just a couple of sources that you can look at if you want to learn more about the Vernon Strip Out Edition. And that's the Vernon Strip Out Edition. I mainly posted this just to sort of clear out some misinformation and the misnomer about the move, which is honestly what most of my videos sort of aim to do. Can I make mistakes? Oh, absolutely, because, I mean, you know, I don't have access to every single book, to every single resource out there. There's still a lot of things that obviously I don't have access to, and you know, I can make mistakes, and that's fine. But I try my best to make everything sort of as clear as possible, and hopefully no misinformation. Hopefully. Again, right, it can happen, but yeah, feel free to correct me in the comments, but yeah. But when it comes to mechanics, of course, I'll do my best to read through books and interpret them as precisely as possible. Because of course, if you look at older Magic books, sometimes the descriptions are kind of vague. So in that case, it's sort of up to reader discretion. But in most instances, in this instance rather, the description is rather plainly laid out. So yeah, I'm describing it as the book says. But yeah, don't be afraid of the angles of this move, as I've discussed in the angles and all that stuff section, right? You can also, actually interestingly enough, you can actually do this move face up with an in-jog. In the traditional handling of the move, of course, you have to spread to the bottom of the deck to catch your break. But if you actually do the move with an in-jog, so if you get an in-jog on the 4th card, and then just catch the in-jog as you're doing like the strip out and then the add-on and all that stuff, if you actually do it with an in-jog, that means you don't have to spread to the bottom of the deck to catch the break. And that means you won't flash the cards that you're adding on. So in this case, if it's the 4 aces or whatever, you won't have to flash them if you actually get an in-jog. So in this instance, just using an in-jog and then doing the move face up will work well. So that's just an additional idea. I didn't really cover the move done face up, but it is possible if you use an in-jog, right? And also, last reminder is that this is an addition, not just a switch. So you can apply this move to whatever sort of effect needs you to have sort of cards added onto it. So, for example, like a Twisting the Aces effect and all of that stuff. Basically, any sort of packet effect, right? Where you need like 2 cards and then you can add more, or 3 cards and you can add more, and all that stuff. Yeah, it's really up to your own discretion. And so yeah, I think that about wraps up for the Vernon Strip Out Edition. Again, let me know if I made any mistakes and all that stuff. But of course, yeah, if you have your own ideas on the move, let me know in the comments and all of that stuff. And so yeah, stay safe, stay healthy, and hopefully I get a new mic soon, because I don't want to be stuck with this mic quality all the time, unless it's bearable. But you know, I don't want to be stuck with this. But yeah, alright, take care, and yeah, see you guys on the next video.